It's Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022. It's been a miserable day here in Detroit, but it's not going to be miserable with the knee-jerks. Detroit Sports Talk with Eno and Big Al. I'm the Big Al, the equation, Al Beaton, Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. Joining me, as always, is the man knows a lot of things about a lot of things, and that would be Greg Eno of the Out of Bounds blog. Greg, how's things?
Things are just fine, Al. Thanks for that. I appreciate that. I am Greg Eno from my WordPress Out of Bounds blog. You can read me pretty much every week, generally on Mondays. My most recent piece was about how the Red Wings should go out and get John Tortorella, which I know won't happen. I know it. It won't happen. I get it. And a lot of people are telling me that, without question, that it shouldn't happen, including Keith Gave. And I said, well, maybe it may not happen, but I think it should. So
I'll agree with them. I don't think it should happen either, but
well, yeah,
we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it.
No, it won't happen. I get it, but to me, it's a fun prospect to think about. I don't know what the vitriol is against Torts, but apparently he's the Billy Martin of hockey, and okay, whatever. But anyway, you can check that out. Al and I have got a lot to talk about, but the most important thing, or the funnest thing we've got tonight, is an interview we recorded earlier with former Tigers outfielder Ike Blessitt, who was all over the map. We covered a whole bunch of ground with Ike, what he's doing now with helping kids in their hitting, to back in the old days as a high school star and as a young big league ball player with the Tigers, a scrape he had with Billy Martin. Of course, who didn't have a scrape with Billy Martin, but this scrape with Billy Martin was a little bit more career affecting to Ike than most.
It affected his, not just his career, but his entire life.
It really did. It truly did, and that's really a shame. But we talk about that. We talk about a lot of things. His disdain for today's game of baseball, you name it, we go over it. So excited to play that for you. We've got, of course, the aforementioned Jeff Blashill firing. You've got the Lions draft. Lots going on in Detroit sports and some other things too. But before we get to any of it, we're going to play a game that we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro? Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I give Al a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if Al can correctly guess that person within the first two clues, he will receive sea monkeys. A whole bunch of sea monkeys.
Thank you so much for giving the opportunity to win some brine shrimp.
Yes. This person, Al, this is unusual because we don't usually do much boxing, but this person made his name in boxing. He was born on this date in 1921, passed away in 1989, but was without question one of the most well-known and successful boxers, not only of his generation, but of any generation. He was an American, was a black boxer, I will tell you that. He was often regarded as maybe pound for pound the greatest boxer of all time.
One of the first names that comes up, obviously, one of the best of all time, pound for pound. You said he was a black man. He died in 89, you said?
Yes.
I'll just try Sugar Ray Robinson.
You got it. Sugar Ray Robinson.
Yeah, to me, he was always the original Sugar Ray, not Sugar Ray Leonard.
Right. And Sugar Ray was, like what can you say? I mean, he was Ring Magazine listed him as one of the best 80 fighters of the last 80 years. Many still regard him as the greatest boxer, pound for pound of all time. So he was one of the first boxers. They say he's one of the first boxers to have an entourage that would enter the ring with him, and he was kind of flamboyant and so forth. And and he did a little bit of acting. He was kind of more of a gregarious kind of guy, not to the degree of Muhammad Ali, of course.
Right.
But so Sugar Ray died in 1989, just shy of his 68th birthday. And you're right. So you get the sea monkeys. Good job.
I can't wait. I'll get the little flashlight and shine it and make them do things, make them dance. Yes, I remember seeing those ads in the comic books and Mad Magazine. No, it wouldn't be Mad Magazine. They didn't have advertising, but comic books, and in the back of car and stuff like that.
Sure.
Oh my, I can't wait, Greg. I just can't wait. All right. All right. We have a lot to cover today. Obviously, we're going to be talking about the NFL draft, big doings at the Red Wings with moving out from Jeff Blashill. But before we get to all that, Greg, we have a big interview.
Yes, we do indeed. Ike Blessed got a cup of coffee with the Tigers in September of 1972. He's a local boy from Hamtramck, actually, and he was had a very illustrious baseball career, mainly in the minor leagues and also, like I said, the high school level. But unfortunately, at the big league level, did not garner enough
Service time
to qualify for a big league pension, which, as you said a few moments ago, would have changed his life dramatically for the good. We'll talk about why that didn't happen and a lot of other things with like an interview that we recorded earlier. So let's play that for you right now.
Gotta say, Greg, that was he was not afraid to speak his mind. And as someone who is growing older, I mean, I'm 60 years old now, and he's like, you tend to like, why would I lie? Why would it be? You're out of fucks to give, as they say.
Right.
You know, so no, I have, and especially knowing the history of the people he was dealing with, specifically Billy Martin, I find the entire thing completely believable, knowing what we know about Billy Martin now. And, you know, I hate to see it. That's how it all went down. It's just thinking back on it, you know, he could have had a legitimate big league career or maybe with another organization, but ultimately got blackballed for essentially doing the right thing.
Right. Yeah.
So hopefully, well, like I said, we'll have links to all the things we talked about. You know, his website. I'll link to the Metro Times article. There's a GoFundMe as well. We'll have links to all that information. You can find out, and you can help Ike out. He really does deserve it.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, Greg. With that, are you ready to talk a little Detroit Red Wings? Since we don't have to do, since I already won the Brian Shrimp. So.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit of Detroit Red Wings as we hit the ground running. We've been talking about this over the last 2 or 3 podcasts as we've both watched the Wings essentially spiral headfirst into the ice post All-Star break with the team looking awful. You know, no offense, no defense, goaltending fell apart. The entire team essentially fell apart over the past 2 months or so. And when there was a post All-Star break press conference where it was a trade deadline press conference, what it was, and when Steve Yzerman was asked about the future of Jeff Blashill at that time, rather than he had always been fairly enthusiastic about supporting his head coach at that point, but at that press conference for the first time, Steve Yzerman essentially said, "We're here to talk about the trade deadline. We're not here about talk about the future of Jeff Blashill," which rose red flags immediately. So, as the rest of the season essentially fell into oblivion and the Wings fell out of the playoff race and injuries mounted and they had some god awful games. They had where they gave up 11 goals to Pittsburgh, and they had numerous games where they were losing. You know, not by 1 or 2 goals, but like 5 or 6, 7 goals. It was just got ugly. Right. So the season finally sputtered to an end last week. And over the weekend, pretty much what we all thought was going to happen did happen. And Steve Yzerman elected to move on from Jeff Blashill by not renewing his contract. He also got rid of most of his coaching staff. Also let go during the purge was assistant coach Doug Huda and goaltending coach Jeff Saleko. Assistant coach Alex Tangay and the entire video coaching staff, though, were retained. And Yzerman, over the latest press conference, said there would be no changes at the Grand Rapids Griffins either. He likes what they're doing there, even though they missed the playoffs there.
Right.
But Greg, the Blashill era has finally come to an end. Blashill's 48 now. He was 204, 261, and 72 as a Red Wings coach. Has a .447 win percentage. That's since when he got the job in June 2015, taking over for Mike Babcock. Blashill now ends his career with the Red Wings anyway, 5th in franchise history in games coached at 537. But I think this is one of those cases, Greg, where, yeah, the Wings may have missed the playoffs 6 years in a row, but a lot of that is because they just had a shit roster and the rebuild had started and whatever. But I think this is one of those cases where I think it was best for everyone involved that it was time to make a change. I don't think Jeff Blashill is a bad coach at all. I don't put much blame on him for not making the playoffs because, well, we saw what this roster looked like for the majority of this time. But I think for everybody involved, I think the Wings roster needs a fresh voice. I think Steve Yzerman does want to bring in his own guy, whoever that may end up being. We'll touch on that. And I think Jeff Blashill will likely will land on his feet. And it wouldn't surprise me if down the line he ends up with another head coaching gig, maybe with a better team, or for that matter, maybe back in the AHL where he cut his teeth as a coach. So this is one of those things, Greg, where neither one of us were surprised it happened. I'm not surprised it happened so quickly. I think some people were thinking, oh, it might drag on for a little bit. Maybe they got some things to figure out, but it really seemed like, Greg, that Steve Yzerman had made up his mind, wasn't going to leave him hanging, and made the move. And to no one's surprise, here we are. The Wings are now in a head coaching search that may take a month or two.
You made a good point a few seconds ago when you said not letting him hang, or whatever you said, don't leave him hanging. And that is kind of a underrated aspect of how you treat people, because in the NFL they have Black Monday, in which that's usually the day after the regular season ends, where that's when most of the coaches get canned, so they're not left hanging either. But it doesn't always happen that way in the winter sports and the other sports. It seems like there can be a period of time where a coach may, his future may be kind of cloudy, kind of unsure, and then eventually they indeed are let go. I think the fact that Yzerman made not just he didn't make the decision overnight, but made the announcement overnight after the Red Wings played their last game, tells me that decision had been made quite some time ago, and that there was no reason at that point, with the season being over, to indeed subject Jeff to any sort of speculation or any sort of anything. And so that's another example of how Yzerman treats people. That's I'm sure wasn't an easy thing for him to do, to tell Blashill that this was going to be it, but I highly doubt that Blashill would have been caught by surprise by that decision either. The last 6 to 8 weeks of the season was just horrific. You mentioned you chronicled some of the scores that they.
Yes. Oh my God, it got ugly at times.
Yeah,
and it literally fell apart. And
and that's not. Hey, you know what? He had 7 years, 7 years coaching an original 6 team. I mean, look at the other original 6 teams right now. And I don't think anybody has had, I don't know. You'd have to go back a long way to find any original 6 club that has kept the same coach for 7 years. Scotty was here for about 9. And if you look at the other original 6 clubs, I don't know which of them has had a coach that long at any stretch.
Well, if I doing a research on this, Blashill was the second longest tenured coach in the NHL, which says, and that never happens for a guy with a career losing record. Right. It says volumes one about the Wings and what the Wings expected over the past few years.
Right. And, the only other one that kind of like that situation that kind of is similar to that would be Barry Trotz.
Yeah.
But Barry Trotz he started with Nashville when they were an expansion team. And he was there forever, Trotz was.
Yeah.
But they kept him around, even though they had losing seasons, of course, because they were an expansion team. And Barry Trotz, of course, has proven to be one of the best coaches in the NHL anyway. But yeah, this is just one of those things that it just had to happen. There's no crime in it. Nobody did anything wrong here. I mean, and Yzerman was really effusive in his praise of Blash in terms of how.
Yeah, I remember the one term he used. He did not run a shit show, were his exact words. Which in the term he was talking about this about, the team didn't fall apart and that he still had control of the locker room. I think that, that impressed Yzerman, even though he felt he had to move on.
Yeah, ultimately it came down, as it should. It came down to how are we doing? Are we getting better? Mm-hmm. Are we not getting better? Yzerman said that I felt like we were just, if not, he said, I'm not sure if the word plateau is right, but we just had reached a point where we were, if anything, we were regressing.
Exactly.
And that was the red flag that told him that, this is a time now to, and he said it almost kind of sheepishly. And I kind of hope that a new coaching staff might do something. So it's just, I think he gave Jeff enough rope with which to hang himself. Yeah. And had the season ended in mid-February, he'd be back. But everything just went so downhill so fast. And Blashill said something which I thought was really interesting. And you usually don't hear coaches admit this kind of a thing, because this was before he was let go. He said, you know what? I felt like when we got to that point in mid-February, when we were kind of on the outskirts of maybe semi-competing for a wild card, that when we lost a couple of games and got knocked back down a little bit, we just didn't, it destroyed us. We couldn't recover from that. Yeah. And that showed me that, he was essentially admitting that either the players were soft mentally, or he didn't do a good job of keeping that same mojo that they had going for them. They came out of the All-Star break, for example, playing okay. And they got to within like 6 or 7 points of a playoff spot, albeit the other teams had some games in hand on them. And then they lost a couple of games, and everything just kind of, Blashill admitted it. He said, we just kind of fell apart. We couldn't handle it. We got ourselves to the point where we raised our expectations. And then when those kind of started to slip away, we couldn't handle it. And we just kind of fell apart. And that, to me, that was kind of a stunning admission. But maybe that's an admission, Al, of a guy who'd been around for 7 years, who kind of felt like maybe the handwriting was on the wall. And
he had to know, that. Yeah. So we see that with guys who had far better records than Jeff Blashill, who just know that after a certain point, one, you're hired to be fired. And two, these guys know that sooner or later, the players are going to stop listening, or it's going to just, it's when players like some of these guys have been with Blashill. You could almost go back to when he was with the Griffins for the most part.
Sure.
So I'm sure some of these guys are like, "Oh, here we go again." I've heard this speech from Blashill before, blah blah blah, and and it's time. It was just time for a fresh voice. Nothing against Blashill. I had my issues with him as a coach, but I still think he was a pretty good one. I mean, and it shows that he's highly thought of, because he was I brought this up on the podcast where he's coached in the World Juniors, he's coached in the World Championships, things like that. So he's going to land on his feet, and people are not stupid. They know the Wings had a very bad roster for the majority of his tenure here. I think most people realize that time runs out for everybody, and that's what happened here. He'll probably end up as an assistant coach somewhere, and then in a few years become a head coach again. Because I really do think with a better team, maybe a different constructed team, his system might work better than it did here in Detroit. It really will. But Greg, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna. No, I mean, you're right. I mean, I'm with you. I mean, I think, and Yzerman said, he said, look, you're judged. Ultimately, you're judged on wins and losses. But he says, really, I have no complaints with the way he handled himself. Yep. The way he had, answered the questions from the media after all these games, and you mentioned the shit show comment, which kind of surprised me that he even said that. But, he just kind of said, I really appreciated everything he did. He represented the Red Wings well. He wasn't he didn't do anything untoward. He handled himself with a lot of class. And I know that's not what's going to move the meter with the fans. I understand that they want to see wins and losses, but for a general manager, when you're in a situation, a few weeks ago, I chronicled kind of the arc of Blashill's career and why he was able to stick around for so long. And it was just one of those things where it's just one circumstance after the other kind of kept him behind the bench.
Between the rebuild, between the change in general managers, there's a whole confluence of things that led to him. And also, let's not forget, he was one of the lowest paid coaches in the league.
Right.
That played into it
Right.
as well. But,
So it got to a point though where it was untenable, and
Yeah.
and it could not, you could not bring him back. You just couldn't do it. For a myriad of reasons, you could not bring him back, and I'm sure it bummed Yzerman out, because he signed him to a 2-year extension last year, Blashill, and I'm sure he wanted him to. He signed him to that extension with the intention of fulfilling it, but he just couldn't do it. I just could not bring him back for another. Couldn't do it, and
right.
so here we are, and now there will be no shortage of candidates. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, and we do. Yzerman did, with the firing went down on Sunday, I believe. Yzerman spoke yesterday, which was Monday, and he did. I did find it interesting. I did see a bit of it live, and Yzerman did. I like the one thing he said here. This is an Yzerman quote: "I'm trying to say as much as possible while actually saying nothing. If you haven't figured that out right now, it was a very Dave Dombrowski-esque press conference, where he talked a lot, answered the questions, but answered them either as vaguely as possible or just didn't answer them at all and answered it in a different way. It was impressive in a way. It was very, especially for a hockey lifer like him, who was essentially, he was in the league at 18 years old. Yeah. So, and here we are watching, late 50s. He's now in his late 50s, doing his best, outdoing Dave Dombrowski with the press conference, essentially. But he did have some interesting quotes along with that, like when he went into on the anticipated coaching search, he had kind of a long dissertation about how hard it is to hire somebody you don't know.
Yeah,
and that refers back to his time in Tampa, where his first hire was Guy Boucher, and his second hire was John Cooper. Boucher, he didn't have a relationship with. Cooper, he knew. And and Yzerman did mention that, all the guys that I talked to, I could have made a case to hire all of them. But ultimately, it took his second attempt to get the guy he wanted in Cooper, because I think Boucher only lasted a couple seasons, maybe 2.5 seasons. And obviously, Cooper is now coming off back-to-back Stanley Cups. So along with that, he mentioned that a new coach does not necessarily have to have NHL experience, which could open the door to maybe someone from Europe, could open the door to minor league coaches, could open the door to NCAA coaches. So, but there are some guys, and we'll talk about this, that there's some guys you want to bring up that are kind of being considered front runners, or we know are going to be brought up. Specifically what Lane Lambert, and you have this thing for torts, but we'll talk about that. Also, when it came to the rebuild, when one of the reporters asked him about possibly speeding up the rebuild, where do you feel we're at in the rebuild? And Yzerman's answer was, well, how do I feel about the rebuild? We're in year 3 going into year 4. Very,
yeah.
But which also did reminded me that, remember how we ragged on Ken Holland about how he said the rebuild could take 10 years.
Yeah.
We're probably in the year 6 right now, and this team is still nowhere near a playoff team yet. So apparently he was right. So, but to kind of sum it up, the press conference, it really was that, he praised Blashill, said it was time to move on. He could not really go into details as when it comes to players. I remember one of the quotes when it came to free agency. He goes, I have a whole list of players I would love to have, but I don't know if I'm going to get them or not. So, so like, what do you expect me to say? So it was a fun press conference, and essentially watching Steve Yzerman dodge damn near every question as best he could. But there was some interesting stuff there, specifically as to the coaching search, where I believe he would like to have a head coach in place by the NHL draft, and there's a lot of talk out there, Greg, that one of the reasons this may take a bit, because there are coaches he wants to talk to, probably assistants, that are currently coaching in the NHL playoffs right now, which started yesterday. So it might be it may take a while for this really to play itself out.
Here's something that he said too, that is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I ever heard this from a GM before either. He's
Yeah.
talking about potential candidates. He said, I'm just going to put a long list of names together from the people that I talk to, from articles that are written with names that come up that any of you know that I'm not familiar with or that I hadn't thought of, and write them all down and do my own background work on all of them, and then put together a shorter list of guys that for various reasons I think I'll really want to talk to, and we'll go from there.
Yes. Yeah, it reminded me of how the Jim Harbaugh hired Don Brown, where he said, I did a Google search on who had the best defense in the NCAA, and his name came up. So, but at the very least, but you have to believe he's got a list of guys he wants to talk to.
Of course.
And there's a lot of talk that Lambert, I believe, it's not Lambert, Lane Lambert might be at the top of the list, who was, and you brought up Barry Trotz. He's Barry Trotz's right-hand man with the Islanders.
Right.
And a former Red Wing as well. So he's got that because he came up, and it was actually Steve Yzerman's roommate the first few years when they were both in the league.
Well, they supposedly he had a chance. Yzerman had a chance to hire Gerard Gallant a couple of years ago. I don't know. I mean, when I say had a chance, only in the sense that Gallant was at the time
he was
unemployed.
Free, right?
But a couple things about that. Number one, Yzerman probably just didn't think it was the right time to make a coaching decision. And to bring in a guy like Gallant.
And why would Gallant come to a losing organization when he's
who at the time would have still would cost a lot of money. Okay, number one. Number two, there was talk that Yzerman doesn't want to hire a friend in case he has to fire a friend.
Right.
Well, that sounds like it could be. It sounds like it could be conceivable that that's the case, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case either, because you mentioned that he does feel comfortable when he hires somebody who he knows.
Yeah, or at least has a relationship of some sort.
With. Which of course Lambert
doesn't have to be a friend, but at least someone he's familiar with.
But I don't buy that notion. I'm not going to hire somebody I know and I like because I don't want to fire him later on. Well, to me that seems like a fatalistic kind of a.
Let alone a guy like Lambert. That's literally the only thing he's got left to do as a coach is to become an NHL head coach. I mean, he's interviewed for jobs. It's not like it would be doing him a favor. It'd be actually the next step for him, someone of his talent.
But you know what, though, Al? And this is nothing against Lane Lambert. It really isn't. But there's some guys that are just assistant coaches, and that's where their niche is. I think
Dave Lewis, for example.
Dave Lewis. I was just going to say Dave Lewis comes to mind immediately. Dave Lewis was a longtime loyal assistant to Scotty Bowman, and before that, Jacques Demers actually, and I mean Brian Murray, and not Jacques Demers, Brian Murray, and he became the head coach almost by default when Scotty retired, and even though Red Wings had some two good regular season records, they flamed out in the playoffs. He didn't get along with Brett Hull. Didn't get along with a couple other veterans. Luke Robitaille, I think, was another one. And why you say, well, geez, why is that the case? Well, because it's different. Yeah. It's different when you're the assistant coach, and this goes for all sports, not just hockey. When you're the assistant coach, players will come to you. They'll talk to you more. They feel like sometimes you're like a go-between between the
good cop, bad cop, and usually the assistant coach is the good cop. Yeah.
And all that changes when you just move that one seat over and you become the head coach. It changes the relationship changes, and you can see that, Al, in everyday life. If you have a job where you've got a colleague who's maybe kind of outranks you a little bit, maybe he or she is a little bit above you on the totem pole, but you feel comfortable because they have a boss who you both report to, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden that person who you're a confidant with gets promoted and now becomes that boss.
Yeah.
It's different. It just is. It's just a different relationship. And so I can see why guys like Dave Lewis, who eventually did go to Boston, didn't do all that well with the Bruins, are just one of those guys. One of the assistants that Mike Babcock had, Bill Peters, went over to Carolina, just didn't quite make it. There's been another assistant, Todd McClellan, who did do okay. Some guys just, so this Lane Lambert talk, I get a little suspicious. It's kind of like the Eric Bieniemy thing in football.
Yeah.
I get a little suspicious of guys who just stay assistant coaches.
Yeah, who get the interviews but don't get the job and end up being the right-hand man of a specific coach. Yeah.
Because how many times how often does it really happen where like a career assistant, a guy who I mentioned Bieniemy in football and other guys that I just talked about in hockey. How often is it when a guy like that finally does get his chance and he becomes super successful? It's like, where have you been all my life? There's a reason these guys don't get head coaching jobs. And I'm not suggesting that Lane Lambert can't be a good head coach. It makes me suspicious when a guy is now you mentioned Barry Trotz. Barry Trotz's right-hand man. Well, maybe that's his niche.
Yeah.
Is to be Barry Trotz's. Now, if Barry Trotz, for example, were to retire this summer, which, Trotz is not getting any younger. Well, what if they do a Dave Lewis thing and they make Lane Lambert the head coach all of a sudden over there? And there's no guarantee.
And I have seen some Islanders fans make that case that he is the heir apparent. Let's just move him up to head coach because we don't want to lose him.
Yeah, but
it does have that Dave Lewis thing all over again.
Well, and Jeff Blashill was an heir apparent. He mentioned those years in Grand Rapids. Yeah. Those years in Grand Rapids.
Those talks where he's a Babcock clone, or it's just like more of the same. He's just a different Babcock, and in a lot of ways he was, except he wasn't quite as miserable a son of a bitch as we learned Babcock turned out to be. But you really think Torts would be a good hire?
Well, the reason I think. Yes, and the reason why
even though he tends to burn bridges, and it's kind, I won't say, and does have kind of a, I hate to use this, comparing to Billy Martin as we just learned, but he does have a tendency to burn teams out, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, that's fair, and that's why I said kind of like the Billy Martin of hockey, where he's short, maybe a short shelf life.
Yeah.
But of course every situation's different. I mean, he's not a one and done. He doesn't go to a place for 2 years and leave. I mean, he was with Columbus for a while. He did a few years with the Rangers. He did a few years with the Canucks. He won a Stanley Cup with the Lightning.
Right.
The reason I think I go by, with coaches, Al, it's always, it seems like you go nice guy, bad guy, good. You said the
players coach, disciplinarian type thing.
And so now it's a cycle. And so now the Red Wings went from the disciplinarian, tough, abrasive Babcock to the Blashill thing. Now it's time to go the other. You know how this goes.
Yeah.
So if you're going to go by that, if you can do that cycle where it's time now for a disciplinarian, frankly, I think it is. I think that the rebuild is that these players now are at a point where they need a whip cracker. And I think that a guy like Tortorella, who is, that kind of a guy,
very abrasive, but he will make things interesting, to say the very least.
Well, the one thing I will concede as to why that would not maybe necessarily be a good idea is because the team is still very young.
Yeah.
And that may not be, and there's talk that he tends to sometimes he'll play head games with players a la Scotty Bowman.
Yeah, and there's talk that he is not a good coach for up-and-coming young players, and this team has probably the top 2 Rookie of the Year contenders at it, in Raymond and Sider. So that's something to keep in mind as well, is that you want to subject what's going to be a pretty young roster next year if we're having to turn over or expecting player-wise. You want to subject Torts to them, or would he better hire, saying if he would be the Larry Brown type hire who would get you over the hump when you already have a player?
Well, yeah, that's fair. But do you also, but I think you also might need a guy who's going to kick in the pants a little bit. Maybe they need some tough love. You mentioned needing a new voice. Yeah. Part of needing a new voice is you become comfortable with the old voice. And you mentioned a few minutes ago about, I've heard this speech before and so forth.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, I don't know. It just seems to me that, and I know I get it. It's not going to happen.
Well, you could make that argument that what Scotty Bowman did to the locker room and when he joined the Red Wings. I mean, how close are the Wings to trading Steve Yzerman back then? Because they weren't sure he was going to buy into it.
Right.
So yeah, it's an interesting. I honestly don't think
Yzerman to buy
but it's
and once Yzerman bought into it, the whole team got better.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And Yzerman definitely changed his game from a 50 goal scorer to an all defensive forward. Which says something else about him. But it's I would just you're kind of on the I'm just kind of concerned about retreads, and I'm always kind of rooting to hopefully see maybe bring up a European coach or an NCAA coach or an AHL coach, something a little different than a retread. Like that's what we saw with the Tigers until they finally got someone in AJ Hinch. It's been retreads ever since Jim Leland left, for example. Well, I don't even want to talk about Austin. But you see that in sports sometimes where it feels like it's a good old boy network. In some ways, hiring John Tortorella would be staying in that good old boy network, where I wouldn't mind seeing the Red Wings go in a completely different direction. But that's just me.
And they might, because Yzerman tends to. I mean, he's
he tends to go his own way. I will put it that way. Yeah. And that goes back to his first draft of Mo Seider. No one had him going that high except the Red Wings, and now he's going to be Rookie of the Year. So, but all right. Now I think we'll agree to disagree on John Tortorella. I think we can talk about something we both agree with, Greg, and that is the NFL draft is exhausting, but thank God it's over. And we won't have any more mock drafts to deal with. Well, there was already a couple mock drafts, but Greg, that month, 6 week period from the combine to the draft is absolutely. The NFL knows what the hell they're doing, because they stay in the headlines every damn day of the damn year, and the build up to draft and free agency plays into that. But we had a draft this past weekend, which is now a 3-day event. First round on Thursday, 2 and 3 on Friday, and then the remainder of the draft on Saturday. As expected, Greg, the Lions selected Michigan edge, I'm old, I like to call them defensive ends, Aidan Hutchenson, second overall. And after all the mock drafts about, they could get the kid from Georgia, or they get the kid from Oregon, or maybe they'll go off the board and get the safety from Notre Dame or whatever, it's funny that the Lions took the one player everybody predicted he would take when this all started, Aidan Hutchenson, because he was available and they need a defensive end. They made one trade, Greg, and it was pretty damn aggressive. They dealt picks 32, 34, and 66. That's the last pick of the first round, an early pick in the second, and early third round pick. They sent that to the Vikings and got picks 12 and 46 back in return. And Brad Holmes then used the number 12 pick to select Alabama wide receiver Jameson Williams, who was coming off an ACL injury suffered in the national championship game. But if it wasn't for that injury, he might have been the first wide receiver off the board. So it's obvious, Greg, that the Lions wanted an impact player early on offense, and they got him, hopefully in Williams. Also, because I find it interesting, the draft pick about the draft going for Williams is that over the last day or so, reports came out that the Lions desperately wanted an impact receiver. So it was reported that they offered a first and third round pick to the Niners for Deebo Samuel, which was rebuffed. And Samuel was an all-pro receiver. Anyway, the Lions used 6 or 8 picks on defense. Their other offensive pick was a tight end, I think they took in the 5th round. And the draft strategy overall received praise. They got all A's and B's from the various pundits. But I do find it interesting. The same people that are giving the Lions A's and B's also said going into the draft that Georgia linebacker Nakobe Dean was going to be drafted in the first round. He drafted all the way deep into the third because of injury and size concerns. And they also predicted that 3 to 4 quarterbacks would be first-round picks. There was only one, and all the other names dropped well deep into the second and third days of the draft. And I also found it interesting when Brad Holmes was asked about the lack of quarterbacks drafted in the first round, and actually there's none in the second. Holmes said, I expected it. That's how we had them evaluated. Which says, remember all the commotion about should the Lions take a quarterback at number 2, or could they trade up to get a quarterback, blah, blah, blah. It turned out that the vast majority of the NFL was completely underwhelmed with this quarterback class, and it reflected in how the draft went down. So it's that's why I take grades. That's why I take mock drafts. That's why I take all of this with a grain of salt. And And, and I'm going to say, yeah, it looks like a good draft, but who am I to say? Because I have no idea about most of these players.
Well, of course. But again, the fan base, Al, just really is eating up this Brad Holmes.
Yeah, it's really over the top. It really is.
I mean, and that's fine. I mean, you know what? They haven't had a lot to cheer about. I understand that, and they like the aggressiveness that he showed with the trade up to get Williams, and of course Hutchinson was I remember we had Mike Shoddy on. I said, if Hutchinson is there, is it a no-brainer? And Mike basically said, yes,
yep,
it is. And indeed it was. As soon as it was revealed that the number one pick was going to be Walker, then,
yep.
The Lions people ran that pick right up.
Yeah, apparently they pissed off the NFL that they got the draft.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But, I mean, hey, it's they drafted positions they needed help in. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to.
Yeah.
You're supposed to.
They doubled up on defensive end in the first two rounds because their second pick of the first pick of the second round was a defensive end out of Kentucky.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And Pascal, I think was his name, Josh Pascal.
Yeah, an all SEC guy.
They got a safety. They got a blocking tight end and. What have you. They didn't pay attention to the offensive line because they don't have to pay attention to the offensive line.
Right.
They didn't draft a quarterback, as you said. And it's funny, you mentioned these players, the whole draft thing is just because Malik Willis was actually thought what the Lions take Malik Willis number 2 overall, or at the very least would they take him number 34.
Yep.
Or 32, whatever it was. And Willis was how many? Where did he finally go? 5th or 6th?
Late in the third round. I don't even remember. It was third round.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the only. I think the one. I believe the God. If it's Perkins, I believe. I think he ended up going like in the 5th round, for example, and he wasn't talking about that first round. I remember you look back a year. You go back a year ago, and they were saying someone like Spencer Rattler was going to be a first round pick.
Yeah,
he ended up transferring from Oklahoma and didn't enter the draft because he got outplayed, was benched. So it's if there was a poster draft for ignoring the NFL media pundits when it came to analyzing players, this draft was it. Because it did not go in many of the way. A lot of the players predicted to go up high, ended up either not even entering the draft or going 2-3 rounds later than the media was selling them on. Or for that matter, you have someone like Walker, who exploded to the top of the draft after his after blowing things out of the water at the combine. He wasn't even in anybody's thought of being a high first round draft pick until the combine. All of a sudden, the NFL was like, yeah, we've had our eyes on this guy, even though he didn't. And the problem was he didn't put up big time numbers because Georgia had 15 players drafted in this draft. I mean, and most of them were defensive.
5 in the first round, I think.
Yeah.
5 defensive players in the first round.
First round, exactly. So, yeah, this is. I mean, as much as I enjoy football, I find the least enjoyable thing about it is the draft talk, because too many people think of themselves as armchair GMs that know more than the guys who are actually being paid money to do it, which is why it was more refreshing to kind of talk to when we talked to Mike last week, a couple weeks ago about this, who was actually watched tape. And we're not talking about, I like this guy because I watched a YouTube highlight reel, which is most fans. So I don't know, Greg. The draft is so exhausting, and I had it on in the background during most of the time. Basically, it's like there wasn't much else going on, and obviously, I wanted to see who the Lions got. But I'm not about to make any kind of judgment. And I think you're right when you're saying there's a lot of fans. I think are getting themselves. They're going to be disappointed, expecting the Lions to, to sniff 500 next year. Because, like, for example, the Williams will probably start the season on the pup. the physically unable to perform list because of his surgery. He may not even be effective at all of next year because of the injury. This is a guy they're probably expecting that he will become a star in year 2, not his rookie season, for example. And, we still got, who is Jared Goff? Because, the way this draft set up, it's like the Lions is like, we have no choice in their matter. Goff is our quarterback for at least one more year. And which Goff are we going to see? The guy who we wanted shot into the moon, or should I say the sun, over the first half of the year, or the guy who looked like a pretty darn good quarterback over the last 5 games of the season? There's so many question marks with this team. And if you ask me, these players are just more question marks, and we can't be sure what the hell's going to happen with the draft. You nailed it when you said people on social media, I think, are really overstating the success of this draft, because we can't tell if this draft's going to be successful in like 3 years.
No, of course not. But I will say this: after watching some tape on Jameson Williams, that kid, and I know he's coming from ACL.
He is fast.
My God, I thought I was watching a video where there was like a 1.25 speed or something. That guy is incredibly fast, and ACL injuries. ACL injuries now are not as,
they're not a death sentence. Not like an Achilles.
I mean, especially for a receiver. A running back who's got to cut, do a lot of stop and start, cutting and left and right. Maybe it's more of a concern. A guy who's all he's doing is running down the field real fast. I mean, I don't think it's really going to affect him too much. All this kid does is just run real fast and catch the ball and keep running real fast. Yeah. And that in today's NFL,
you need that.
Right. Yeah. And so if he can indeed, a lot of pundits had Williams pre-injury, maybe the top receiver in the draft, and even post-injury, one of the top 3 or 5. So, and that, let's face it, that's where the Lions, even though they signed DJ Chark, there was only 1-year deal, they needed that. They needed a guy to complement Amon-Ra St. Brown. They needed a playmaker. They needed a burner.
And we've talked about this on the podcast for ages. They need impact players, guys who make splash plays. And this brings up some of the past drafts, Greg, where like some of the early draft picks, Jared Davis, an inside linebacker, Hutchenson, a tight end, Ragnow, a center. Those aren't impact positions that the Lions are using first-round picks on. Now we got Holmes, and this draft, he goes big with edge, and wide receiver, which is also 2 of the highest paid positions on the field, which means if these guys hit, you're essentially getting expensive talent on a discount for 5 years, which is something that's very, very important in today's NFL.
Right. Exactly. So, but Hutchinson it's a good pick for the franchise. It's a good pick for the fans. Yeah. It's a good
local guy.
It's a good pick if you're the PR department for the Lions. It's a good pick there, and the guy can flat out play. I mean, it's not he can flat out play. He doesn't have any issues. He's not Charlie Rogers Redux. I mean, he's
this is another sign of the culture thing we've heard. I don't know how many times I've heard that word over the past month.
He comes
from culture.
Right. He comes from a good family by all indications. So I think he'll be fine. I think
at the very worst, he's a high floor guy, which means he may not ultimately end up an All-Pro or Pro Bowler, but he's going to be an every down guy who's going to play. He's going to play, even though who knows if he ends up being a star, but he's going to play and have a long career. I mean, he's got that kind of talent.
Right.
Anything else about the draft, Greg? Or are you as exhausted about it as I am?
Yeah, it is exhausting, but there's also some excitement there.
Yeah, but we're old enough to where we tend to we don't drink the Kool-Aid, as they say. And there's a lot of Kool-Aid drinkers in the immediately after the draft. There really is, and that's. I mean, I learned I've been burned so many times by this organization that I've long been in the show me before I actually start to get super excited about anything involving the Lions. I'm with you there. All right, before we wrap things up, let's touch a little on the Tigers, who've had a rough start to the season, Greg. Obviously, heading into 2022, hopes were high the Tigers would get off to a fast start, or at least respectable, play 500. And for a while they were, but the wheels have kind of come off over the past few weeks. They had a 1-5 road trip, and surprisingly, the one win was beating Clayton Kershaw and the Dodgers. But they currently stand at 7-14. That's a .333 win percentage, a -20 run differential. They are tied for last in the Central with the White Sox, 6 games back of the Twins. And interestingly, the Twins are the only Central team with a winning record right now. So bullpen has been excellent. They may have the best numbers in baseball right now. They're at least been top 5. But the rotation has been in flux because of injury. And offensively, they've just been playing awful. They're hitting actually, offense is down throughout baseball. And the Tigers, the issue with them is they aren't hitting for any power at all. They have a team slugging percentage of .322, and that's a .631 OPS as a team. That's not going to win you a lot of games. That means you got, with an OPS and slugging like that, it means you got to win a lot of 2-1, 3-2 games. And The Tigers aren't good enough to do that right now. Right. And the defense. Oh, the defense. Oh. That loss in Minnesota with the you had Grossman misplaying a line drive. Then you had Scope throwing a 6-hopper relay throw to the plate. And then you had Haas airmailing a throw to third base that he shouldn't have thrown to begin with, which allowed the winning run to score. That was just like the cherry on top of this team's god-awful defense. But then again, especially in the outfield, they are playing guys out of position. And some of these guys that are like Scope wasn't signed exactly for his defense. He was signed for his bat. But there's some issues here that they need to get straightened out soon, or we're not going to, you can already see it on social media. Fans are pissed because they were expecting a better team than what we're seeing right now. This is eerily similar to last year's ugly start, where the season was over by mid-May.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us bought into the hype. A lot of us bought into, I know you've said before that rebuilds aren't linear, and I just looked at a 77 win team. I looked at offseason acquisitions, and I said, why can't they make that? Why can't they be a little linear here? And you mentioned the defense, and guys are just scuffling like crazy. I know it's cold weather.
The candidates to regress have regressed, like Akil Baddoo, for example.
Baddoo scared the hell out of me. This does not surprise me. But I was not expecting Scope to do what he's doing. Candelario drives me crazy.
He's been not bad in plate. He's also been bad in the field. He's the league average player, and he hasn't been.
Every time I think this guy is turning it around, is gonna be a solid big leaguer you can count on, he regresses. He's been doing this year. He's been doing it ever since he's been a Tiger. He shows some flash, then he looks awful. Then he shows some flash, then he looks awful. Now he's back to looking awful again.
Yep.
I wasn't, of course, there's been injuries. Yes, you mentioned it there for sure, no question about it. Riley Green started it, and then they all started falling like dominoes after that. I understand that. But the defense is just atrocious, just absolutely atrocious. And the hitting is soft. And if you take away that 13-run game they had against the Rockies a week and a half ago, the numbers are really bad. And I know it's early, I know it's cold weather, but everybody else has got to play in the same weather. And I mean, look at some of these other records the other teams have. So it's kind of, the only thing that's keeping this from really spiraling out of control, a couple things. One is the White Sox are, I don't know what's wrong with them. They went in the 1-10 streak, if you can imagine.
Right.
And so they were widely considered to be, excuse me, the class of the division. They're scuffling. There's nobody in the division other than the Twins that's playing above 500. That's the only thing that's kind of keeping this from totally spinning out of control, is that the division stinks. So, including the White Sox. So it's like, okay, if the White Sox are struggling and the team that nobody expected to win the division, which is the Twins, is leading the division now. That tells me that there's going to be a reset sooner rather than later, and there's room, there's time to turn things around without being buried. If this was if this was last year, when the White Sox, did their thing, the season would be out of control. It would be over. But right now, the only thing that's keeping this from getting completely out of hand is the White Sox are so bad. And the White Sox are without question the best team in the division. Why they're playing so badly now, I don't know. I'm not there. I don't watch the games. All I know is they started 6-2, and all of a sudden they're 7-12. Right. So they're having problems. That's what's keeping the Tigers season from really, I think, depressing a lot of people around here. Right. But it's been really, and they played 12 of the first 15 at home, and they went 4-8 in those 12 games. The only series they've won was when they won those first 2 games in Kansas City. They've lost every other series they've played. Yep. So, and like Hint said, we deserve this. We deserve where we are. We have to dig ourselves out of this. But at the same time, if you think I'm going to, call it a day after 19 games, you're crazy. I mean, there's too many more games to play, which is right, of course. But it's disheartening for a fan base that was expecting a lot. 12 out of the first 15 games at home out of the box, and they just played really badly. And if it wasn't for Miguel Cabrera's, March toward 3,000, the only 2 guys that are really doing anything are Baez and Meadows. Yeah. Really. I mean, everybody else is just really struggling. Yeah.
It's struggling is to say the least. They have not been good, and obviously we have to give credit to the bullpen. Even though Soto blew up the save, but Michael Fulmer has been lights out. They've gotten some good performances from guy like Bo Brisky, who no one saw him coming up from the minors and holding his own. We'll see how Alex Faedo is going to pitch tomorrow night. He was their number 1 draft pick in 2017, and who has been battling injuries and ineffectiveness for years, but it now looks like he was pitching well in Toledo, so he's going to get the emergency start tomorrow. It would be nice if he comes up and does something. But you would hope they were going to tread a little more water in this. But the injuries have not helped. They're missing 3 starters, because Tyler Alexander got put on the 10-day, joining Manning and Mize, and let's not even talk about some of the other pitching injuries they've dealt with. So it's been an ugly start to the season. Hopefully tomorrow, the doubleheader tomorrow might be the start of it's a new month, a new season, and maybe we'll get lucky. But the only bright spot, as you brought up, was Miguel Cabrera, who got the 3,000 hit mark after it only took him 13 games to do it this season. He became the 33rd player in Major League Baseball history to reach 3,000 hits. There was a ground ball single off of Colorado Rockies right-hander Antonio Sensatella, I believe, to right in the first inning in Game 1 of their doubleheader last Saturday. What was interesting about this whole thing, though, is it kind of all worked out because Cabrera got the hit in front of a full house on a perfect Saturday afternoon, with the sun was shining, full crowd, place was ready for it. Everybody saw that it was rooting for it. It happened in the first at bat of the game, but it could have happened. Cabrera was on I won't say a tear. He wasn't hitting the ball hard, but balls are falling in. And when he got to 299, he had a 3-hit game. All 3 hits were C&I singles. The one was a broken bat looper and a couple of light ground balls that snuck their way through. Well, controversy ensued, Greg, when Aaron Boone intensely walked Cabrera when the Tigers had a 1-0 lead and there was runners in scoring position. He elected to put Cabrera on first base to set up a force play at any base, and it ultimately backfired because Meadows doubled in 2 runs, and that was essentially the game. But it was hilarious to see how pissed off the fans at that game got. Booing Yankees suck and cursing them out. And, it was absolutely hilarious. But in the end, I think it worked out for the best, because it was a crappy night. There was a small crowd, and Cabrera got to get his 3,000th hit in front of a full house, so it all worked out in the end. But the controversy over Aaron Boone essentially making the right baseball decision, I still found pretty darn hilarious. People were so pissed off that he didn't get an opportunity to get his 3,000th hit that night.
You know, if you're at the game, obviously you're upset. But as soon as I saw the situation, and really Scope was the one who should get the most of the hate. He was the one that bounced. There was bases loaded, nobody out. Okay, bases loaded, nobody out. Yeah. Scope taps into a 1-2-3 double play, which you don't see those very often, but there we go. It leaves second and third with 2 outs. And so I said, well, guess what? As soon as I saw that, I said, walk him. Oh, you can walk him. Empty. You got an open base. You're trying to win a baseball game.
And at that point, Cabrera's like 3 for 3 or something like that.
Right. So, I mean, walk him. Yeah. And he did it. And Boone said, look, trying to win a game. I knew I was going to get the reaction I did, but he said that's payback for 2003 when you helped beat my Yankees in the World Series. And that's okay. You know, hey, you know, if you're at the game, you're upset, of course. Yeah, of course. But it was Scope that created the situation. Scope shouldn't have hit into a 1-2-3. If he doesn't hit into a 1-2-3, then even if he hits into a traditional 6-4-3, you have maybe a different situation.
Right.
So I think that it just was. It was a good baseball move. I understand if you're at the game, it stunk, but you know, and it is the Yankees. Nobody likes the Yankees. That's part of it, of course. But it wasn't like it was the last game of the season or the last at bat of his career, or even the last home game on that homestand.
Right. Yeah.
We're going to play another home game, so he was guaranteed to get 3,000 at home. It just wasn't in front of that particular set of fans, and I understand why. If you're at the ball game and you want to see history being made, of course you're upset, of course, and you don't care that it's a good baseball move because you want to believe that opponents are gonna understand the moment and kind of go against the grain. But Aaron Boone is trying to win baseball games, and Lord knows the Yankees fans, you know, don't like him either for whatever reason. And even though he's got the Yankees playing really good right now, and what are you gonna do? I mean, I want to walk him too. I would have.
Yeah, exactly. It's it was strategy wise, it was perfect. You know, you can't argue against it. You know, you can say, well, Cabrera's not that good of a hitter anymore. You know, Austin Meadows is a much better offensive player at this point. But you could also see the strategy of, you know, getting a forced play at every base. And it wasn't like Meadows beat them with a line shot or anything. He hit a damn blooper that dropped in between like 2 players, you know, in shallow center field that went for a double. So, you know, it's I know it worked out. I'm just glad now we can all kind of move on. You know, he's got the 500th hit. He's got the 3,000th hit. 500th home run. He's got the 3,000 hits. And now hopefully they don't have to play Cabrera so much because his numbers still are not. Even though he was hitting the ball fairly well, it was for absolutely no power. He's slugging like 330 something right now. His production at DH is not what you want to see, right? You know, from a full-time hitter at this point. No, it's time to kind of ease back on his playing time, but we'll see what actually happens here. And I know we talked about this before, but you know, it's now that that's out of the way, maybe the Tigers can maybe optimize their lineup a little more. And an optimized lineup means less Miguel Cabrera. You know, even though he's a legend and all this, and he when he came out this week said, I want to be a coach with the Tigers when I retire. You know, and that would be interesting. Because how many times has a legendary player become a coach and it actually succeeded? Doesn't happen that often. But Cabrera as well, though, he really seems to be the type. He loves baseball so much that I could see him wanting to stay in the game. Especially, you've seen, I would be afraid for his personal life if he didn't have baseball to fall back on, because he's made some very, very questionable choices in his personal life. And if he didn't have baseball to fall back on, I don't know what would happen.
Well, I mean, and I don't know what that means. I don't know if the Tigers would. I mean, I suppose. Yeah,
would it be ceremonial like Al Kaline, or would it be something serious?
Well, would he help out in spring training like a la Kaline?
Yeah.
or would he be a full-time coach for the
A
whole
roving
year?
instructor or something. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I mean, it sounds like he
Mhm.
wants to. I don't know if when he said coach, I don't know if he means he wants to travel with the team and be in uniform in the dugout every day, or if he wants to
Mhm.
be a spring training guy, or
Yeah.
like you said, a roving guy, or maybe he just wants to. Maybe he works for the team down in Venezuela and works with the players down there. I don't know. I don't know what that
Yeah.
means. I don't know that. I don't know if he knows what it means. I know
Yeah.
AJ Hinch said, "Well, he's welcome here as long as he wants." Well, of course you're going to say that. I mean, what else are you going to say at this juncture?
Mhm.
You know, when it comes to that time in a couple of years from now, I guess I guess we'll find out what his involvement might be with the team. But it's nice that he wants to be involved with the team in some way, shape, or form. I mean, there's a lot of guys, Lou Whitaker, who didn't want anything to do with the team after
Yeah.
they retired, and that's fine. But at
Yeah.
least he's showing some sort of desire to want to stick with the organization. I just don't know in what capacity that would be.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. All right, Greg, I think we've about run the gamut. We've been all over the place in this show. So we have one more. I guess I can call it. We got to get the home plate, and that would be our jerk of the week. So who is your jerk of the week?
Wow, I kind of want to stick with the NFL draft because I want to talk about these and I know that a lot of this is hindsight is 2020. I understand that.
Yeah.
But these folks who actually considered the Lions draft Malik Willis number
Yeah.
2, or at the very least number 32 in the first round, and be the quarterback of the future I didn't think it was a good idea to begin with, but now it really looks bad. He's
Yeah.
slipped all the way down. I think you said the third round or something like that.
Yeah, I believe it went in the third round. Yeah.
And nobody talked about Kenny Pickett, and Kenny Pickett was the first quarterback to be drafted, of course.
Right.
And I don't know where some of these folks what they're thinking. I mean, this is kind of maybe an unfair jerk of the week because I know hindsight's 2020, but I didn't going into the draft. I didn't think that Malik Willis was that valuable that he would go certainly not number 2 overall. And I don't think if the Lions had drafted number 2 overall, they would have been the laughing stock of the league. But and even at 32, I don't think he would have been worth it.
Yeah.
So I know that I'm kind of maybe being a little rough on people here because maybe, I don't think this is hindsight because I would have when the draft started, I would have told everybody, don't draft Willis number 2, don't draft him number 32. He's not that good. I mean, when I say he's not that good, I don't think he's going to have a great. I look at him and I see a whole lot of Cordell Stewart. I see a whole lot of who's the kid that the Raiders drafted years ago?
Jamarcus Russell.
Yeah, I see a lot of that kind of stuff in him. Now he could prove me wrong and end up being a great steal for the Titans, but I just think that the thought that he would go number 2 overall, and there was some serious discussion about that. I just so I know it's kind of rough on people. I'm being a little rough here. But I'm going to give my jerk of the week to everybody who thought that Malik Willis was going to be drafted number 2 overall in the entire draft.
Yeah, I would say your jerk of the week is the NFL draft industrial complex, to say the very least. Yeah, it's again, this whole draft, as I said earlier, was kind of it really showed it's a crapshoot. None of us know what's going to happen, and the Malik Willis stuff kind of drove that whole home. So I'm with you there. Right, there is so much I could go in for my jerk of the week. The world's going to hell in a handbasket, especially of what we've heard over shit that's happened in the world over the past 24 hours. I don't know what's happened over the past several years, but something that kind of went under the radar, what I found interesting. Well, I'm sure you're aware, Greg, there's been a lot of talk about free speech lately, specifically in regard to Twitter. Well, I know I'm sure you're familiar with the name Sage Steele of ESPN, an anchor there.
Yeah, sure.
Well, she's sued ESPN, saying ESPN is violated her free speech rights because she was punished and suspended for things she said on a podcast.
Right.
Essentially, she is an anti-vaxxer. She was anti-mask mandate. She also questioned Barack Obama's bona fides as a black man because his father is white, amongst other things. And I guess it caused quite the waves at ESPN. I believe she was suspended, punished, and things like that. And now she is suing ESPN, saying her punishment was being punished is a violation of her free speech rights. And once again, Greg, as always, the people who yell loudest about their free speech don't understand free speech.
Right.
Free speech comes down to the government restricting your speech. I don't see the U.S. government getting pissed off at Sage Steele for being an anti-vaxxer. This is her employer. Employers have every right in the world in an at-will environment where you have a contract to punish you as they see fit if they think you are putting them in a bad light, which she definitely did. She's an idiot. But we're seeing it over and over again from people screaming, oh, it's violating, like on Twitter. No, with the talk of people being booted off of Twitter is a violation of free speech. No, it's not. You violated their terms of service. They're a private company who can do that. It's not the government. That just pisses me off to no end when you have idiots like Sage Steele claiming their free speech is being violated when all it is, when you have it's a corporation, which in today's environment are people and have the same rights, can punish her as she sees fit if they put it, because she made comments that put her in a bad light. And she's not the only one. You just got to look back at Jamel Hill. Remember, and hers were the total opposite, because she's a big time left wing. She's a left winger. You know, she's very liberal. I wouldn't even say liberal. She's very progressive, and she got suspended for stuff she said against Trump.
Right.
And she ended up leaving the company because rather than put up with this stuff, she left. But you got Sage Steele, completely the opposite of a complete numbskull who thinks her free speech is being violated because she is a numbskull on a podcast and got punished. So my jerk of the week is Sage Steele and other nimwits who confuse free speech with actions and being punished for your own actions. There are two completely different things, and they get confused all the damn time by the dumbest people on the planet.
I agree.
God! When I read that, I go, "Oh my God, how dumb can she be?" That is screaming. That is screaming. I'm suing you. Please settle, and I'll go away. What it sounds like to me, but. Oh, my God, Greg. All right. With that, we've had quite the controversial podcast today. So with that, let's end things on a high note. And once you get out the thank yous and all that fun stuff you always do at the end of the show.
Well, I want to thank once again Ike Blessed for giving us 40 good minutes of it was just a real raw, and we talk a lot about like when Greg Campy was with us and how refreshingly candid Campy was. And Ike he's genuine. I mean, he is who he is. And that's just, I just loved it. I loved every minute of it. And I really appreciate it. So thanks to Dave Mesry, by the way, for helping set that up for us. So thanks to Ike. Read me on my WordPress Out of Bounds blog every Monday. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. And I want to just thank my lovely wife Sharon for putting up with this nonsense, and thank you, Big Al, for making Tuesday nights so gosh darn fun.
Yes, I want to thank you, Greg, for not shutting down my free speech rights and making time out of your busy schedule to talk some sports. As always, give a shout out to Linda, who's been busy saving lives in New York. Looking forward to seeing her. We're going to finally go back up to the cabin this weekend and have some fun. Oh yeah, like put the boat in the water and all that kind of fun stuff. As always, if you want to listen to the show, we can be found at all the usual places: Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public, thekneejerks.net. That's the homepage where you can find all the links to everything we talked about. I'll have links to all of Ike's stuff, for example, in the show notes at thekneejerks.net. So, and please go to his GoFundMe, go to his baseball training website, and I'll also link the article in the Metro Times. It gives us a lot more information. And I think that about covers it. Hey, do we have any upcoming guests on the schedule right now? Or
yes, I should have said that. Yeah, we do. The next time we're with everybody on May 17th, we'll be joined by wonderful sports photographer Greg Shamus, who's going to talk to us about having covered the Masters and playing the course, which I find at Augusta, which I find fascinating. So we'll talk about that and we want to bring back our old friend
Mike
City
Shoddy.
Hall.
Yeah,
No,
and City. Yeah.
Shoddy as well. We bring back
Yeah.
City Hall to talk NBA draft. I think we'll
Mhm.
bring City back on May 31st to talk about the NBA draft and what's going on in the playoffs, and we'll be that much closer to the draft, and we'll know that. I think at that point we'll know what the position the Pistons will be drafting in. I think.
Right.
And we'll talk about that with City on May 31st. So we got Sheamus on May 17th, City on the 31st, and who knows after that.
Yep, exactly. I can't even keep. I almost forgot we had Icon today. So, oh my God. Oh, I can't keep track of it all, Greg. I'm getting old. Anyway, let's get the hell out of here because I got a podcast to edit, and Craig's probably got a cocktail waiting for him. So, until this time, 2 weeks from now, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha.
Ciao, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.